Good afternoon. My name is Jeannie Martinson, and I am publisher of Wood Dragon Books. And we are based in southern Saskatchewan in the small town of Mossbank. And it is my delight as a publisher to interview our latest author, Monique Desrosiers. It is not the first book we published of Monique's, but it is a very new release, hot off the press as it is just available now online. The book is called The Three Heirs, and it's my delight to interview Monique about this particular book and where it's going. In regards to the book, Monique, first of all, I'd like to ask you generically, what do you like about the whole writing process and being an author?
Oh, well, if you read a lot of books, you're always reading what the author wants you to read. And sometimes you don't like the way a story goes, or you would have changed this about a specific story line. And what I really like about the book is that I have that license. I own it. I can bring my characters wherever I want them to go. That's the best part. Don't ask me what I don't like.
Well, I know as an editor and a publisher, the first draft of the book is the labor of love. And then the 4, 5, or 6 edits that follow it are less of a labor of love, and they are more and more difficult to do, and not necessarily difficult, but tedious. And with Wood Dragon Books, we have a standard of editing a book a minimum of 5 times. So I know when you went through all those rounds of edits, it's like, oh, when is this finally going to be over? When will it be good enough? And so I think it's wonderful to be at that point where we see it in print and in paper in your hand. So this idea particularly, where did this idea come from? The initial idea?
Well, according to Stephen King, somebody who wants to write should read every day. And that's what I was doing. I was reading a little bit every day. And these ideas just start to formulate in your mind, and you go, well, I can try to investigate that. Or you just write down the plot, on the computer and just keep it somewhere. And eventually you'll think about adding to it. And when you have enough to add to it, that's when you see the book coming. And sometimes it just writes itself. It really does.
Well, I think it seems like it might write itself, but I know that the effort and energy and research you put into this book was quite phenomenal. So just thinking about that research, you've done a lot of research for the Three Heirs in respect to the food the characters ate, clothing they wore, the population of certain cities, because it's based in the mid-1800s, distances and time traveling from one place to another. So without spoiling it for the readers, what's one thing you kind of discovered but didn't incorporate, or what did you change about it in the book? What were some of those time-sensitive or era-sensitive issues that you had to kind of struggle with?
One of the big things was the travel across the ocean, because my book also has a little bit of story in England, and most of it occurs in the United States. So I had my characters go from one place to the next. I found that people who could afford it, there was steamships available for first class travelers, and it would take them 2 weeks to get across the ocean. People who couldn't afford it, the ships that they used would take 6 weeks to get across the ocean. And I needed 6 weeks, but I needed her to travel in first class. So here's the license part. I took 6 weeks on the best ship. My reader doesn't have to know the exact details, but that's what I did.
Well, I think when you're writing a historical saga, historical fiction, there often has to be a little bit of massaging as far as some of these facts. However, I do really respect how very true to the historical period this book is written, and very, very similar your previous book, The Cartwright Men Marry, how you really made an exceptional effort to make sure. I know in that book, there was one thing I challenged because I edited that book as well, as to there's a place where he has matches. And I said, were matches invented yet? And they literally were like a decade before invented and of use in the US, American West. So I know how very specific you have been with all those little details that really bring the reader into the book itself. So in the Cartwright, speaking of the Cartwright Men Marry book, you had 8 main characters, and
Yes.
they were all in 4 couples, of course, because that matched the 4 men from the Ponderosa of Cartwright fame. And in this book, you have 6 characters. There's the rich widow, there's the madam of a brothel, there's the 3 heirs, and then in the book, I'm not going to say anything more, but it was the hidden figure at the back of the room. So how did you develop so many characters and keep track of them in the book? That was an obvious challenge.
Well, it is a long and detailed process. And when I'm 3 or 4 chapters into the book, I already find myself thinking, oh, hang on, how old would she be if I'm writing 13 years from now? Or I don't know if it's 13 years from now. I want to make it 13 years from now. So I have to figure out what is the year. And I found that if I keep very detailed, very minute details on the books on a separate sheet, and I don't write it in, I actually type it in, then it's easy for me to reference because I can split my computer screen in 2 and have both informations there available at the same time. Because if I have to go back and read something, then I've lost my momentum of what I wanted to write just because I was lost on a detail. And so it's a long, drawn out process, but it's been working for me. It's like keeping a family tree, and it's always visual.
I know that there's time hopping in the book in the sense that it starts with these characters at this reading of this will, and then it explores the backstory of all these characters and the 2 older women that they're connected to. And so in the printed book, there's actually different fonts being used between the situation that's happening in the library itself with the reading of the will, and as the characters go back in time. And I think that that's a really good use to kind of remind the reader, oh, now we're back there. And there's actual lines of, this is the date and this is where we are. And I like that each chapter starts with, okay, these are the characters in this chapter to remind you. I have one more question for you, Monique, but I want to just read for the people on the call, the back of the book, which is, I think, really kind of creates the curiosity of the beginning of the journey of these characters in the book. 3 people receive an invitation to journey to Philadelphia to be present for the reading of a will in which they are named as beneficiaries. Emily Thordeau is anxious to come back to Philadelphia to hear the reading of the late Delilah Newstead's will and discover her connection to this benefactress, a woman she has never heard of or not met. Lilith Raitt is also surprised that she is called to the reading. Tragedy has cost her everyone she once loved. How could she possibly be related to someone who is a resident of a city she has never set foot in? Graham Lester, an Englishman new to America, is puzzled by his invitation, but decides to attend the reading of the will to satisfy his curiosity. Now they are assembled together, the 3 beneficiaries, the lawyer, and a mysterious observer. The air is tense with the conflicts of the past. How are they all connected in this web of drama? And why has the dead woman brought them together? And so I find that really compelling as far as, okay, why are they together? Do they know each other? Do they not know each other? How do they know this woman? How much money are they getting? It just really increases my curiosity over the whole story. So I want to just ask you one last question, actually a couple last questions, and then we're going to go into the recording. Are there any plans for sequels to these 2 books, to the Cartwright Men Marry or the 3 Heirs? Are they going to be just standalones and your next book is going to be a whole new dynamic?
I'm never going to say never to this question. Right now, I don't have plans for a sequel to either book because the material I have is not sufficient to fill up all those pages, nor is it interesting, I think. It needs to really have a plot, something that you work towards. But the material I do have doesn't fit in with those characters. And so the second part is, yes, I am working on a new story, And I've just come back from a trip overseas, and I did some research over there. This is going to be a story that starts in Scotland. So it's interesting. I hope to be finished with that within a year. I don't know how long it's going to take me, but
So that was going to be my final question, because your first book is based in primarily around the area of Nevada at that particular time of the Cartwright men when they were of Ponderosa fame. And this book is in the mid 1800s. So, you know, you have a preference for that kind of older period. So my question is, now with this third book being in the UK and being in some of those countries, is it going to be in the same time period, or is it going to bop back and forth from the present to the past like the Cartwright Men married book did?
That's a loaded question, Jean. Well, I've been to Nevada, so it was, and I love Bonanza, so it was easy to write and not get off track. As you know, with my second book, it didn't start in Philadelphia. It started in Chicago, because I've been to Chicago and I thought this would be a good place to start this. But it wasn't populated enough, as we both discovered. And so we changed and moved the whole book to Philadelphia. As for my third book, I've got it right now starting in the 1950s. And who knows, it might have to go back 100 years.
Well, I think we're all looking forward to that. That's for sure. I'm excited about whatever new book idea you come across, because I find them very compelling. We're going to take a break now. And when we come back, Monique is going to read from her new book.